CIOs say things like, you can't manage what you can't see.
And a lot of these AI agents to very enthusiastic interns. Go into your job and find all the things you never want your kids to ever have to do. That's what you give to AI. You have to allow failure to happen, but not to be catastrophic.
CIOs are racing to deploy AI, but few can answer the most dangerous question: who's really in control? Our guest today has lived the tension across three worlds: technology, investment, and art. Oren Michels co-founded Mastery, building the foundation of the API economy, and then sold it to Intel. And now he's CEO of Barndoor AI, the control plane for agentic AI in the enterprise. And somehow, between startups and code, he became a Tony-nominated Broadway producer. So, Oren, welcome. So there's going to be a lot to discuss.
Good to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So maybe you can just walk me through, what would you say is one of the pivotal moments that you had in your career that really opened up your eyes to the need for governance?
There have been two of them, one for each company, right? So at Mastery, I was running business development for the world's second best blog search engine, and the world didn't really need the first best one. But we had some technology that a big company wanted to use, and I was biz dev guy, so I had made this deal to sell them access to our search technology that they wanted to pay us for. And they said, great, just give me access to your API and we'll go and use it. So I went back to our engineers and I said, well, great news, I just sold this big deal and all we need to do is give them access to our API. And I was told, well, we don't really have that. We can't give access to it because we can't control what happens to it. If they, they're a big company, if they hit us with the kind of traffic they probably would, it would take us down, and we couldn't handle that. And so there were all these rules we had to put in place if we were going to be able to do business with this company that was going to pay us a lot of money. And I realized that without the governance, without the ability to set rules around what people are and are not allowed to do, you can't build a business with an API. But if you have those things, APIs could be an incredibly powerful way to go off and build businesses. And so armed with that information, I thought, I can't be the only person having this problem. And so I went looking for the solution. It didn't exist. So we started something called Mastery. And about a year and a half ago, I was starting to read about AI in the enterprise. Why is AI not succeeding in the enterprise? Why are we not seeing all these great use cases when there's so much promise? And I'm thinking, well, I think I've seen this movie before. And it's a situation where you have this incredibly powerful technology, but left to its own devices, you can't control really what it does. Nobody actually really understands what goes on inside. And so without being able to have companies set guardrails, set rules, see exactly what's happening, when you give a job to these things, say, go do this, to see how it tries to go about fulfilling that job, without that ability, it's just not going to be successful. And this great business opportunity, I'm all about bringing technology to solve business problems and to help businesses grow. In both cases, these were not security issues. Security was necessary in order to solve them, but we're not doing this because we want to have security. We're doing this because we want to have success. We want to have people using these tools in organizations to build their businesses. But without the governance, you can't make that happen.
Would it be fair to say that freedom without guardrails can eventually break trust? And if so, what are some examples that you've seen?
I would disagree with the word eventually. It happens quite quickly, actually.
Okay.
No, I mean, there have been examples in the news recently where AI deleted someone's entire code base when they were using it to work on some stuff. The concept of the lack of guardrails, like you can go back to a company like PayPal. PayPal started in the early days of the internet when we were all just nice to each other. Everybody trusted everyone, and you could email money to someone. What possibly could go wrong, right? And then suddenly a lot started going wrong, like almost immediately. And to their credit, they stopped being a payments company and started to be a very, very deep security company that happened to handle payments. And because in that case, the whole thing, and if you look at really how the technology that allows us, whether it's to do e-commerce or to trade data or to put personal information out there or health information, whatever it is, none of that happens without the guardrail.
I think that's very well said. And so I believe every generation of technology wrestles with what I would say the same paradoxes. We want speed, but we need safety. And as you just shared, so we want to scale, but I feel like we're fearing, the loss of control. So when enterprises talk about AI governance and compliance, they talk about having those guardrails in place. Do you see this more as a behavior or as a practice? Like, how would you coach or guide a company to maybe shift their way of thinking around the need for this stuff and not being, an iron hold of saying, we want to hold you back from being innovative, but we want to enable you for freedom. How would you phrase this and position?
There's this protocol called MCP that we're all using now, and I'll assume your listeners are familiar with it. So most of the MCP that's out there are these MCP servers that many companies are spinning up. The vast majority of the pre-configured ones out there are read-only and are highly restricted. And the concept is we want to make sure nothing bad will happen when you do use these things. But the problem is that if nothing bad can happen, then the likelihood is nothing good can happen either, because you can't tell someone, I've just hired you to come into the company and you can browse our Salesforce, but you can't actually ever create a record or update a record. That would be a very difficult way to get your job done. And so you have to be able to look at it and say, well, how do you rationally take risks with this? And I think it's similar to how we do it with people. So you hire an intern and they come in and you say, okay, here is a task for you. And here are the things I'm giving you access to go do. And you sort of watch and see how they do it. And if they do it in a way that's rational, they limit their blast radius to things that are relevant to the task at hand, and they don't do stupid things when they're doing that. You say, okay, you're pretty smart. We'll let you do some more things. And I think that mode is very similar with a lot of these platforms. It's give it a job, see how it goes about trying to accomplish that job. And if that's consistent, then you can start opening those pathways to let it do that and potentially give it more jobs. I mean, I like a lot of these AI agents to very enthusiastic interns. They don't really know the context of the world, but they really want to do a good job. They want to impress you. They don't, and they don't have the experience of the context that an executive has. I come to my job with a certain amount of self-governance. I know it is a stupid thing to go into Salesforce and delete a bunch of opportunities. That would be a dumb thing to do, right? And probably if I did that, I'd get fired. And if you're an AI agent, you don't know what stupid is, and you're not afraid of getting fired. And so all these concepts that say, I'm going to base what agents are allowed to do on the authorizations of the human using them is missing the point that agents aren't humans. Yes, I should not be able to tell an agent to go see things I'm not allowed to see. That's table stakes, but you have to have something stronger than that. And you have to understand the difference between what happens with an AI agent that's non-determinative versus, let's say, what happens with an engineer who's building code using an API deterministically saying, here are the instructions to do, go do those things and get this result. But that's, it's just a very, very different world.
I like the analogy that you used about an intern. And I'm going to go back to the improv world, which is yes, treat AI and give it a task, watch how it performs, and make decisions on how you then move forward. Will open up that opportunity for what else it can do. And I feel like there's a needed shift in thinking, whether it's from the executives or from those that are leading these initiatives, to realize they don't know everything, that they need to create an open, safe environment for things to have a bit of room to bump into limits.
Yeah, you have to allow failure to happen, but not to be catastrophic.
And so what was the genesis behind Barndoor? Like, what is your North Star of what you're trying to do?
Star is very simple. It's realizing a handful of things about how I believe this world's going to evolve. So one thing I believe is that the concept of a chat interface where you sit and talk to this sort of generalist PhD who's super smart is useful if you're writing code, but it's not all that useful for most jobs in most companies. Most people in most companies don't spend their day chatting with a PhD. This is not how we usually get our job done, right? You must have the ability to actually take action. It can't merely be, I'm going to talk to this super smart thing and it's going to give me some suggestions on how to do my job. There has to be more, or we're all wasting our time, right? We have to allow that to happen. And so to allow that to happen, you need to encourage experimentation. have a world where failure isn't catastrophic, and ultimately create the ability for there to be a bunch of these agents running around. So the next part of it that we thought about is you don't only hire one kind of human. You're not going to only hire one kind of AI. The idea that there will be one AI to rule them all in any company is inconsistent with how the world works. And so since each AI, each different agent has a different context and does different things on behalf of different humans, you have to manage that context individually, piecemeal with every single platform and every single person you're using. It's going to get really, really hard really fast. Because today, companies are experimenting. They've got tens or dozens of these things, but there will be hundreds of thousands of them in most decent sized companies in the next couple of years. Managing those piecemeal will be hard. So we built something that allows you to manage it across everything, which I think is very important. And I think the other part of it is we're here to succeed. And so as people start using these things, it's very hard in the company to know exactly what everyone's doing. But if you have visibility into what the agents are up to and how they're interacting with the other tools, you can surface where people are having success and go find those people and say, help the rest of the company figure out how to be successful, and use this ability to see where the agents are actually playing and what they're actually doing to say, oh, well, we've solved this problem this way. Let's use that same sort of concept to solve this problem over here that hasn't thought about doing.
I oftentimes hear CIOs say things like, you can't manage what you can't see. And there's a big discussion on a visibility layer. Do you believe it's a visibility problem or a concern or a lack of understanding and clarity? Because to me, they're very different. What would you say?
I think that another challenge we have is that we're sort of still in the faster horses phase of this, right? We're taking people using tools and we're saying, here's an AI, it will use the same tool in the same way to do the same thing a bit faster. And while that's nice, that's not changing anyone's life. And I think that what we need is we need to have in place the framework for people to experiment, to try things, to build things, and accomplish with AI the things we as humans can't currently do at all. So it's not about taking that person's job. It's about doing something that wasn't doable before in a way that is accretive to the company in a major way. And if you can create that happening, and then you create the framework where that can happen, well, your CIO is now not a cost center. They are not managing a behind the scenes thing. They're providing a major catalyst for the creation of value, which I think is what CIOs should want to do.
What you said reminds me of a story, and I would be curious in your thoughts. And it was, building that faster horse concept. And I heard this when it was related to quantum. And so, all the chips and traditional computing is just building a faster and faster horse. Eventually you build a faster car, but it's still the same plane of speed. And
Right.
someone once said, well, when we introduced the plane, the first plane that took flight was actually slower than a horse, if you look
Yeah.
at the actual speed.
Yeah.
But what happened was it opened up a new dimension. It opened up a new
Sure.
area that was off limits or not even available. And so do you think that AI is opening up that same shift in, I guess, space for innovation to take place?
Absolutely. And I think your analogy is a really good one because, nowadays people hook up MCP, they hook it up to Claude. Let's say they hook it up to Salesforce and they do a hello world. They go, show me 10 opportunities that are this size. And dutifully, it will show it to you. It takes 2 minutes by the time the whole dance happens and whatnot. And you just did something that in the Salesforce interface you could do in 5 seconds, took you 2 minutes, but it proved a point, right? It's like, okay, now that we know you can do that, that we've got the basics done, what new things can we do? How can we, with taking advantage of this and the other tools at your disposal, stitch together something that really will accomplish something useful? And so, yeah, it's very much that. It's many things about trying to accomplish things within AI are inefficient the first half dozen times you do them. until you figure out how to get good at it. And, with the chat interfaces, we all have observed the evolution of prompt engineering because most people saw the first time they saw it, they thought it was the same as a Google search bar. And they asked it a Google question and did a really bad job of answering it. And then many people got dismayed by that and sort of said, well, this sucks, I'm done with it. And some people said, well, what is it good at? And started figuring out some really, really amazing things it could do.
So I'm curious from your position and where you're seeing things, how many leadership roles or people in leadership, whether it's a CIO, CFO, CTO, or even the CEO of companies you work with, are taking a step back to really understand what their business is good at and what they should almost say no to, and having go back to that term clarity on where they should put their focus and attention, because there seems to be a thousand options of what AI, of what technology can do, but there seems to be very little understanding for organizations as to what the environment is they currently have, like how complicated they have made things over the past 15 years,
Yeah.
and that there might be a need to kind of do some self-evaluation. Do you think that is something that companies are doing right now, or do you think they're just avoiding it?
I think some are, but I think the bigger issue is that so many companies did the 12-month POC for AI, and they bought a bunch of chat licenses and they turned it over to everybody and they put it out there for 12 months. And, you build it, they will come. And they sat back and they waited for the ROI. And, we're coming to the end of those POCs and we're not seeing a lot of ROI. And I think that this concept of if you build it, you put it out there, the dude in finance is going to go, oh my God, I got this thing now. I'm going to totally change how I do my job, is not necessarily how humans operate in companies. And so I think it's more of it is not enough to merely say we're going to be AI first and buy some licenses to Claude or to Chat or whatever and sit back. I think you really need to engage with people. Find the folks in your organization or your consultants, if you have them, or whatever it is. Find the folks who are really good at looking at business challenges, looking at opportunity, and saying, we have this thing that's real pain in the butt, and this thing should be able to do it. How are we going to go about doing it? I've had a conversation at an AI conference last week, and I thought that the gentleman I was talking to a really good analogy. He said, go into your job and find all the things you never want your kids to ever have to do. That's what you give to AI. And I thought that was really interesting. That would be a great way to improve the world using this technology.
I feel like we went through a pretty big shakeup in the market right now. You have a lot of companies that have been laying off white collar employees, a lot of tenure. There's a lot of innate knowledge that is leaving these companies right now. And then on the flip side, you have a lot of people coming into the workforce who are not sure what their role is going to be. They're not sure what value they bring. Do you have any guidance on those who are making a transition either by choice and also to the younger generation and stepping into this new world where it's incredibly exciting, but I think that there's a lot of uncertainty and concern?
Yeah, I think so. Our team, we're 22 people. We're mostly engineers. We don't have any junior engineers on our team. We have senior folks and we have AI. And this concept, and the offshore team that would you give a bunch of stuff, sort of work behind the scenes and churn out code, that whole thing is gone. And so what you have to figure out is where are those new senior engineers going to come from if they don't get to start as junior engineers? You can substitute marketing person for engineer. You could substitute, pick the role. In any of these roles, the sort of generalist early career person who soaks it all up and eventually becomes senior, that path is a tough one though. And so what I was seeing work is getting really, really good and experienced at an aspect of this and going deeper and narrower as your path to get to where you're going. So, in our world, in order to build the product we've built, we need cloud scale infrastructure people. We need deep identity folks. We need deep security folks, right? So if you wanted, hypothetically, to be an engineer in our company, you probably want to get very, very deep in one of those areas as quickly as possible. Go build some things in it. Identify a place where there's some opportunity for you to really. I was talking yesterday to a young woman who wants to get sort of in the marketing side. It turns out she's really, really, really good at social media. She's been doing social media outside of the technology world, and she wants to get into sort of marketing technology. So it's like, take that expertise to a company and say, I will solve this problem for you. And while you're there, use that as the opportunity to learn everything else. And that's sort of how you move up. But I think you have to specialize and get the context that is needed to do these roles at a much earlier point in your career than you had to in the past.
That's really good insight. And what would you say for those who have deep experience, point of view, or someone that has, done a role for 15, 20 years, things are shifting beneath their feet? What advice would you give to them?
I think there it's just it's the opposite. It's get really, really good at using AI to fill in the blank. Understand the part of your job that needs that context and that expertise that you've developed over those 15 or 20 years, and really make sure you stay current on it and really understand it, and be able to take on a job where, because you have that, the rest of it you can do with AI and some outside people. In both cases, also really understand the difference between how we as humans create and how AI sort of extends that creativity. AI doesn't really create, it extends and it fills in the spots in between. But at this point, it's not thinking, it's statistically constructing things in a probabilistically likely pattern. That can be incredibly useful if you know how to use it. But it also know its limitations and figure out what you as a human can do that this technology can't.
I heard someone who was very experienced went through a downsizing, and they were really getting almost depressed of, the world's falling apart and there's no options.
Mhm.
And they decided, well, I'm going to take all my thought leadership, all the experience, all the documents, publications, just the wealth of things I've done as much as I could into a folder, and have AI almost act as a sparring partner to find a product market fit for his skill set or their skill set into the market. And I found
Mhm.
a creative way of building a reverse engineer of, hey, based on what I've done, based on my skill set, my personality, all the things
Yeah,
how can I bundle this? How can I package
yeah,
this in such a way
yeah,
as to go and solve a problem? And
yeah.
I feel that it is such a
They
traditional
look great
approach
at that.
needed. And
Yeah.
I think getting away from the traditional consulting of, how much are you per hour? Don't worry about the hour. Let me come in and let's discuss what you need solved and what the value is in solving it and doing it in the fastest amount of time. Because if I'm going to try to come in here and solve a problem, and if you're paying me per hour, I have no motivation to fix it. And so I think that there's a significant shift happening in just the consulting sector as a whole. With AI, customers are now expecting those savings to be passed on. Do you have any insights into what you've seen from the consulting slash professional services firms on what they're doing to pivot to this new world?
Yeah, we're talking to a lot of them because it's unsurprising that their clients are demanding agentic AI solutions, and to deploy them, they need stuff like what we've built. So we're talking to all of these various firms. I'm seeing some firms are attempting to create their own technology products that they can sell to their clients to be the AI that their clients need. I don't think that's a winning thing. I don't necessarily want my to be bundled in with my PS firm. I'm seeing others that are just trying to gain a lot of knowledge internally to use these tools internally so they can bring them to their clients. But the other thing you're seeing, and it's all the AI companies are doing it, are these what now calling forward deployed engineers, which is a fancy term for your PS team. And what I love about those is that companies that are needing AI right now don't necessarily have the talent and the experience in-house to really effectively apply AI for these business problems. It's unsurprising. It's relatively new. If you wanted to say, I want someone who has 5 years experience implementing AI, It doesn't exist, right? And so the best you could do is have someone who's done a bunch of them over the past year. And the way you get that person is you probably pay for it through the various AI provider companies that you're working with, because they're seeing how these problems are getting solved elsewhere. They'll help you find the low hanging fruit to really gain value quickly. That's in theory what those folks are supposed to be good at. Finding people who have a track record, it won't be a long track, but have a track record of successfully solving problems in this way is what, you're seeing the established consulting firms finding those people, hiring them and bringing them to bear. And then you're seeing new specialized firms spring up that are good at this. Back in the early internet days, you're a company, you need a website, the kid down the street codes the website for you. And then a year later, you've got purpose-built science and these folks that are, these massive consultancies who are now creating a whole category around it. I think you're going to see the same here.
It's interesting. I've heard a lot of Silicon Valley companies are trying to take the approach of this forward deployed engineer following, doing, and I think it's starting to break. And what I mean by that is this: the people from Palantir and just the type of work they do, whether it's government, DoD, military, it's a very big skill set with a very clear win and loss. You know if it works, you know if it doesn't. And putting custom solutions, you're almost building it for an ecosystem, because you build it for one branch of the military, you can port that learning over to other places. And I don't think the same concept really applies in the work world, where you can come in and build something custom for one client and be their engineer, and then just simply take that same thing and bring it to the next.
I don't think it's building things. I think it's how do you use my toy to solve your business problems? And businesses, I'm a generalist manager. I have run theater companies, manufacturing companies, software companies, a bunch of different kind of companies. My job is the same in all those companies. I make sure we have the resources to do what we need to do. I find people to build things. I find people to sell things. I sell things myself. I try to be profitable. That's what I do. And I can bring that experience to bear over a broad series of companies that that I either am running, or I'm doing now, or I'm on the board of, or whatever. And that experience is consistent across. If I've used, I'll make it up, OpenAI, Palantir is its own specific. I've used a generalist tool like OpenAI to go into 3 manufacturing companies to go help them create some value. 10 more manufacturing companies probably can learn from what I learned in doing that. And after starting in 2006, sold it in 2013, you had a whole professional services team. They weren't called forward deployed engineers, but they did exactly what those folks were doing. It's like company X needs to have APIs. Well, they finally learned how to spell API. They hired us, they bought our platform. Okay, what are you going to do with it? How do you get value out of it? Well, they didn't know. They just believed what I said when I said this is going to be a great thing. So they would then bring our folks in and we'd say, well, let's talk about how you do business and talk about the systems you have and figure out ways to turn some of those things into APIs that will help you grow your business.
I totally agree. And I think where I'm seeing this shift is, instead of the forward deployed engineer, which, I'm looking at it from that technical point of view, is that forward deployed solution, is that forward deployed entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
You don't have to have that technical background, because we have the technical people. I need you to come in and apply the learnings and understandings that you've learned across businesses that are either in the same sector or the same. There's got to be enough similarity that you can apply that learning over and over again.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for whether it's younger people or those who have experience, to bring in that level of understanding in that forward deployed model. I just thought the term engineer to me was
Yeah.
boomer.
I think that it's just that some of these tools, if you look at most of the agentic platforms that exist out there, as they are right now, you kind of have to be an engineer to get them to do anything useful. Right. And so I think it's in that sense, all of these folks, there's a group of engineers who also have sufficiently good user interfaces that they can talk to customers and they can understand business stuff. And it's folks like that. You can't be wholly non-technical, but you also may not be the person who is, the deep, massive senior engineer person who understands how to architect a complex system. It's, the slider between UI and geek is set somewhere in the middle.
That's fair enough. There's kind of a multi-horse race right now as to which platform is going to lead. Do you think it's going to be one who's going to take them all, or do you think it's
Nope.
going to be a variety? And if so, are there
It's a
any that
variety.
you're aware of that you think are slowly around the corner that we should be keeping our eyes on?
I think that at this point, one of the great things about hiring AIs to work in your company as opposed to hiring humans is if a better human comes along, you've got a relationship with this one and you feel bad firing them. The AI is like, I don't care. We will always be seeing new platforms coming out that approach problems in a different way, that become more efficient, that are good at doing this particular thing, but not good at doing that particular. That's just the nature of how this will develop. And I wouldn't want to suggest to any company that they close off their ability to make use of those as they come in. I think you want to do the opposite. You want to try many things, continue to try things, and work with the ones you have. It's sort of like, if you're hiring to fill certain positions, you have the luxury of hiring 50 people knowing you're going to fire 45 of them and not feel bad about it. And you're going to continuously be doing that as you build agentic workforce at your company.
So, with the experience that you've had in tech and investing and on Broadway, how have you brought those learnings and skill sets to almost cross pollinate into what you're doing today?
Everything is storytelling. And whether it's raising money for Barndoor, understanding that frankly, everything is theater, right? You have an audience, whether it's in a board meeting or a pitch, you walk into the room, they know certain things, they feel certain things, they're at a certain place. And your job over the next hour is to get them to a different place, that place where they're going to do the thing you want them to do, right? So you have to figure out what the arc is to get them to that place. And you figure that out, whether it's in business or it's in theater, it really doesn't matter. If you're successful in that, your venture succeeds. And if you're unsuccessful in that, if it's bad fundraising show or bad theater show, your venture is not going to succeed.
I think that's very insightful. And I think everyone who's in business should take improv at some point.
Agree. I totally agree. It's a great skill to have.
What are some of the core things that you think a leader could learn at improv? Are there any nuggets?
Certainly improvisation, right? But it is storytelling. And improv, the thing about improv is that it's real time. You are both performing and writing. And at the groundlings, the improv classes, the ladder you rose up to the point where you may or may not get selected into the company, the second to last of those was 100% writing lab. It was a very intense class. It was all about writing, not about performing. The ones before you did the improv games, then you did the writing lab, and then you did an advanced class where you sort of put it all together. And the ability to craft an entertaining, concise answer to a particular situation on your feet without losing your audience is an incredibly useful skill.
Is there anyone that comes to mind, whether it's in business or, even in your experience in the arts, that you think was a master expert at improv or just jumps out as like this person was someone that is going to be hard to beat?
In terms of the classics, the Steve Jobs, this whatever, right? But I see it every day in a lot of the Broadway lead producers I work with who are able to, this is not an easy business. It is financially a lot riskier than investing in tech companies. You spend a lot of money very quickly and hope it works out. And being able to craft a story around that and being able to, at the same time, be holding a creative idea and a financial pitch at the same time to bring all the folks along. You have to, if you're doing a Broadway play with a star in it, you have to make sure that star wants to be there and feels they're going to be properly. All of these things together, a typical Broadway musical has, I think, 14 different unions involved. It has hundreds of people who are in the building to work on that every day, not just the cast and the orchestra, the crew, the box office, and the publicists, everybody, it's an army of humans that are there every day. And orchestrating all of that in a way that everybody is pulling in the same direction is incredibly difficult. Hats off to the ones that succeed there.
I didn't realize that there were hundreds. I knew that it was a lot, but I didn't really.
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in that building.
And so just a few more questions. What is one piece of advice that you wish someone had given to you when you were younger?
When I was running Mastery, it was the second time I had raised money for a company, but it was really the previous time I was sort of a hired guy when I came in and did it. But this was a company I started. So I was the guy. And I would go to these board meetings every quarter, and well, we had them. And I was always convinced they were going to fire me. So I was always nervous and defensive, and I just did not enjoy it. I was not really able to make use of them because I was just assuming that they were going to fire me. And then finally, a trusted person on the board meeting asked me why I did something in a certain way. I told him this. And he said, look, if they fire you, they've got to take your job until they find someone else. None of them want your job. Like, oh, okay. That's good to know. I hadn't really thought of it that way. But yeah, you're right. None of them want my job. And so the whole thing got a whole lot easier.
That's really good advice. What would you give to someone who's just entering into the workforce that wants to learn from the lessons of leaders and those who have walked the path before? Is there anything you would say to them?
Engage with the people who you want to learn from. We all love people who think that we're useful and that think we've done interesting stuff. I love it when someone reaches out, says they want to grab coffee and learn from me. I think that's an incredibly flattering thing, and don't be intimidated by it. Find the people who are doing the job you want to have someday and see about how they got there and, get to know them. You also might find out once you get to know them, you actually don't want that job, which would be useful information to have.
I think that's a great way to summarize everything. Reach out to those, ask questions.
Be curious.
Know that AI is not going to take over. There still needs to be humans in the loop because we are so important. And just want to say thank you so much for jumping on and sharing some of your thoughts and insights. Really appreciate you just being authentic and giving some guiding principles and ideas to those who are taking those next steps.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care.
That was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just think there's so much happening right now. And, whether there's a forward deployed engineer or entrepreneur, there's place for creativity to be brought back into the marketplace.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how people are going to find it, but you almost have to create your own space.
You were going to see a lot of people doing that. I am seeing people start companies and release first versions of products. It used to be you had to have a CEO and a business person to get your money and a product person to figure it out and a tech person to build it. And then you stopped needing the money because early software and deployed hardware became free through open source and AWS. So you got rid of the business person and just a product person and a tech person. And now I'm seeing people getting rid of the tech people for the early stages. Once you scale, you got to have, but you can now have an idea and come up with a prototype to get somewhere without really knowing how to do this. And that's a big change.
Yeah, I think the whole vibe coding, determine market fit can be done in a weekend. You can set a livable interface and you can start to go and pre-sell, which is, in my opinion, one of the best ways of starting a company is get a customer to fund it.
Yep, exactly.
So this is really good. Thank you so much for jumping on. I really enjoyed meeting you, and I will send this over as soon as I can.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mike. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Enjoyed this deep dive? Hit like or drop a comment with your biggest Salesforce challenge and subscribe for more tactical insights. Know a CIO who has a story worth sharing? Tag them below or send us a message. We'd love to feature them next.